Hamas published a new hostage video days after the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu implied that there are now fewer hostages who are alive in the Gaza Strip. Major airstrikes were reported in the northern and southern parts of Gaza. The IDF is approving new plans and is expected to call over 60,000 reservists back to duty. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Gaza continues to deteriorate. The Red Cross issued a new report on the conditions, while the Israeli military is drawing up new plans for distribution areas in the southern parts of the Strip. I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive in. On Saturday, March 3rd, the Al-Qassam Brigades published a new hostage video showing Maxim Harkin. This is the second video the group has published showing Harkin. The last one was published almost exactly a month ago and showed him alongside another hostage, Bar Burstein. This video, which is 4 minutes and 14 seconds long, opens with Hamas militants digging into a seemingly bombed-out area, going into a tunnel and talking to each other about looking for who's inside. They then locate Harkin, who appears injured, and he is seen mumbling to them that, quote, Bar is still inside, end quote, implying that Burstein is buried in the bombed-out area. The video then turns to seeing Harkin badly injured later on, with his arm and head heavily bandaged and bloodied and a patch over his left eye. Like in the previous video, he calls himself prisoner number 24 and states that he was in a tunnel that was heavily bombed by the IDF. He states that this is the result of Israel's quote-unquote military pressure that is supposed to secure the release of the hostages, and states that he is badly injured and in a bad state, does not have access to medicines or to a hospital, and does not know the condition of his friend, again seemingly referring to Bar Burstein. He chastises Netanyahu and the Israeli government and states that if one of their sons was held in Gaza, then the war would already be over, and gives an indication as to when the video was filmed. He states that soon Israel will celebrate its Independence Day. I will say that Israel's Independence Day was celebrated this last Thursday on May 1st, so when he says soon Israel will celebrate Independence Day, implying that the video was shot in the recent days. In the video, he asks that people not go out to celebrate Independence Day, and to instead take to the streets and demand the release of all hostages. Similar to what was said in some of the other Hamas published videos, Harkin goes on to say that the Israeli government will likely term this video psychological warfare, but he says that the only psychological war is what is going on in his mind, knowing that this video may be the last time that his family sees him or hears his voice. Like in most of other Hamas's published hostage videos, this one also ends with a fade-out and a writing across the screen in Hebrew, English, and Arabic, stating that the hostages will only return home in the framework of a hostage deal, then an hourglass going across the screen stating that time is running out. The timing of the publication of this video was very likely not a coincidence, and it comes just days after Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu seemingly implied that Israel has information about more hostages that have been killed in the Gaza Strip. So, the details about that. On April 28th, during a meeting with people participating in Israel's Independence Day celebrations, Netanyahu enumerated about the hostages that have been released and those that are still in captivity. When he was talking about those in captivity, he stated the official numbers, that is 59 hostages in captivity, 35 of whom are confirmed dead. He then stated that up to 24 are alive. However, at that moment, his wife was caught on camera as she leaned in and whispered to him, "No, less than that." And he responded by nodding and acknowledging her correction, stating that okay, but he's saying that up to 24 of the hostages are alive, i.e. he's not saying that 24 are alive, but possibly up to 24. This started a trajectory of rumors about knowledge that Israel may have with regards to hostages that have been killed in the Gaza Strip recently, and on April 29th, a day later, it was reported that several ministers in the Israeli government have been informed about quote-unquote grave concern that the Israeli military has about several of the hostages. I will say that grave concern about the hostages has typically been the term that was used by the Israeli intelligence when it has information that a hostage has been killed, but it cannot definitively confirm this. On May 1st also, U.S. President Trump stated during a meeting with hostages that were released that he understands that there are less hostages alive than there were before. In light of this, I'm going to add some information about what we know about the hostages that are still in captivity. So again, there are currently 59 hostages that are in captivity, 35 of whom have been confirmed dead by Israel, leaving 24 that are possibly alive. Of those 24, life signs were received from 20 of them. That leaves 4 hostages about which there is no information, or I'll say at least no public information that has been released. In addition to that, 2 out of those 20 hostages from whom life signs were received include Bar Burstein and Idan Alexander. I will say also that Alexander is the last hostage with U.S. citizenship. The video that was published today that I mentioned above heavily implies that Burstein was held in an area that was recently struck by the IDF. And in addition to that, Hamas stated on April 19th that the area that Idan Alexander was held in was also bombed out by the IDF, and that the group now has no knowledge of Idan Alexander's fate. Now, I emphasize, I'm not implying that there is information about the fate of the 4 hostages from whom life signs were not received, and I'm also not saying that there are any rumors that Netanyahu was possibly referring to them or Idan Alexander or Bar Burstein. There are no rumors, as far as I could find, with regards to the identity of the hostages that Israel may think have been killed recently. All I'm reporting is the public information and about the life signs that we know. Once again, life signs were received from 20 out of the 24 hostages who might be alive, but within those 20, there are also 2 hostages, one of whom Hamas has said explicitly it doesn't know its fate since then, and another that Hamas is heavily implying may have been in an area that was recently bombed out by the IDF. Moving from this to the ongoing hostage negotiations, things appear to have reached a complete stalemate in the last several days. As a reminder, the sides had been presented with a new framework for the deal in the last several weeks. This involved a 5-year ceasefire, the release of hostages and Palestinian prisoners, Hamas surrendering its governing powers in the Gaza Strip, and an IDF withdrawal and a complete end to the war. After, at the beginning of the last week, there were different news outlets, including Reuters and Al Arabi Al Jadid and Al Arabiya, who all reported that there were advances and breakthroughs in the negotiations. By the end of the week, this trend was completely reversed. Israel had denied that there were advances that were made and reiterated throughout the week that it would not accept any deal that included an end to the war without Hamas being defeated and disarmed, and Hamas responded by stating that it would not advance on any temporary truce that did not include a complete end to the war. By May 2nd, Egyptian sources had stated that the negotiations have completely broken down, and on May 3rd, Al-Ahbar, which is a Hezbollah-affiliated news outlet in Lebanon, published a report quoting Egyptian sources as stating that the negotiation rounds have failed, and that while the United States has promised to continue to pressure Israel into accepting the deal, at this point the negotiations are frozen. I will say that report also added that Egypt is going to try to work on a new framework, possibly a 1-year formula, with Hamas gradually surrendering its governing capabilities in exchange for the gradual release of hostages. However, at this point, there's no active negotiation rounds that have been scheduled, leaving us currently at a complete stalemate. Turning from this to the Gaza Strip, at the beginning of the week, there were several instances of active fighting that were reported in different areas of the Strip. Specifically, intensive fighting was reported both by the IDF and the Al-Qassam brigades in the areas surrounding Gaza City, specifically in Beit Hanun and Saja'iyah in the eastern parts of Gaza City in the northern parts of the Strip, as well as in the southern areas in the Morag corridor, that is this area the IDF is holding over here, and in the Tel Sultan region, that is the biggest neighborhood here in the town of Rafah. Throughout the week, there were several reports of fighting, again, in the eastern parts of Gaza City. However, over the last several days, the bulk of the activity was major IDF airstrikes that were reported nearly every day. These included attacks in Jabalia refugee camp on April 28th and in the Darj Tufah region of Gaza City on April 29th, so that would be in this area and this area all throughout Gaza City, as well as in Hirbat Hoza'a, which is the eastern parts of Han Yunis in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. Over here, there were major airstrikes that were reported on May 1st. In addition, a particularly noteworthy bombing took place on April 30th in the Al-Nuseirat refugee camp that is in the central parts of the Gaza Strip, right around here. According to reports on the ground, this was the most intensive bombing that region had seen. Several people reported that they felt the ground shake beneath them when those airstrikes occurred. With regards to casualties, the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip reported on May 3rd that since the collapse of the ceasefire on March 18th, some 2,396 Palestinians have been killed throughout the Gaza Strip. I remind everyone that the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip does not distinguish between militants and civilians in the Gaza Strip. It simply tallies the entire number of Palestinians that have been killed and documented. Their bodies have been brought through Palestinian hospitals. The IDF, in turn, has not published the total number of Palestinians it estimates have been killed since the return to fighting, but the military did state on May 1st that some 1,800 targets have been attacked in the Gaza Strip since March 18th, and that the military estimates that upwards of 400 terror operatives have been killed since the return to fighting. So again, it is possible to say that 400 terror operatives or militants have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the return to fighting, and the Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting that that is out of a total of 2,396. But once again, those two agencies aren't talking to each other. The Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting how many people have been killed in the Gaza Strip in total, and the IDF is only reporting how many militants it estimates have been killed since that return to fighting. Looking more broadly to the ongoing fighting in Gaza, amidst the collapse of the hostage and truce negotiations, on May 1st it was reported that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has approved a massive expansion of the current fighting in the Gaza Strip, with the aim of gradually increasing the military pressure on Hamas, leading up to the visit of U.S. President Trump to the Middle East. This is going to happen in the middle of May. According to reports, the logic is that Trump, during his visit, is also going to visit Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and possibly there will be a breakthrough in the negotiations as a result of the pressures that those countries will be under during Trump's visit, and that Israel wants to increase the military pressure on Hamas to make it more amenable to that pressure, possibly to move forward on a deal closer to Israel's terms. On May 3rd, the Israeli military confirmed the reports, announcing that it is preparing for a major expansion of its activity in the Gaza Strip. Now, I will say that the military did not report on the specifics of the plans. However, several reporters in Israel have leaked different facets of what has reportedly been approved by the military. What I'm going to report now is piecing together those different leaks, but again, I emphasize these are unconfirmed leaks, not the official statements of the military regarding to the plans in the Gaza Strip. According to the reports, after cabinet approval on Sunday, the IDF is going to issue a major draft of reserve soldiers in Israel, some reports stating that up to 60,000 Israeli soldiers are going to be called up to reserve duty leading up to this big expansion. The military then plans on evacuating Palestinians from both the northern parts of the Gaza Strip as well as some parts of central Gaza, seemingly following the model that was implemented in Rafah when the entire area of Rafah, the entire southern city, was declared an active war zone and all Palestinians were called upon to evacuate north towards the Al-Masi refugee camp. Following this, it was reported that the military plans on changing the tactics from its previous raids into areas and then withdrawing from them, which has allowed Hamas to rebuild every time. And instead, the IDF will systematically comb through the areas that Palestinians have evacuated, clearing out Hamas militant activity and setting up more permanent positions in those areas so that Hamas cannot come back and rebuild. In a moment of analysis with regards to this, I'm going to say that parts of this plan resemble the original quote-unquote general's plan that was proposed in Israel 9 months ago. I'll also say if you want to know all the details about that plan, I refer you to a video that I published about it on November 10th of 2024. I'll add a link to that video in the first comment. In brief, I'll say that that plan focused on declaring the entire area of northern Gaza as a closed military zone and cutting off all aid to that area, thereby forcing all Palestinians to evacuate as the IDF takes up more permanent positions throughout that entire region. The plan emphasized the need to completely besiege the area while distributing humanitarian aid elsewhere, thereby forcing the Palestinians to migrate towards the areas of southern Gaza and leaving anyone in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip to be presumed a Hamas militant, and therefore the IDF will be able to clear out that area far more easily and take up permanent positions there. Now, the reason I say that the current plans have elements that resemble the general's plan is that currently there is no humanitarian aid that is entering into the Gaza Strip already for 2 months since March 2nd. I will say also that the Red Cross reported on May 2nd that the situation in the Strip is the most dire that it has been since the war broke out and that the entire humanitarian apparatus is on the brink of collapsing. Meanwhile, over the past week, it was reported that the IDF has been preparing new plans for aid distribution in the Gaza Strip, specifically setting up an entire infrastructure in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. The aim of these plans, according to what has been reported, is to stop the previous system of aid coming into the Gaza Strip on different trucks that then would travel to the different areas in Gaza and be distributed by local distributors, and instead have several centralized areas that are designated distribution sites and are controlled by the Israeli military, and having Palestinian families themselves come through IDF checkpoints in order to receive weekly aid packages that are distributed by international actors. The aim of this, according to what has been reported, is to avoid situations where Hamas-affiliated systems would take over the aid in the different parts that it was being distributed in Gaza. Instead, all of the aid will be distributed in areas that are controlled by the IDF, and Palestinians themselves will have to travel to those areas in order to receive the distribution. It was also reported in the last several days that Israel and the United States are developing these plans together and that they're soon going to be announced. However, combining this plan to have a centralized distribution area in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, along with a new military plan, it seems that these plans would de facto implement at least part of the general's plan by declaring areas in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip fighting zones, while forcing Palestinians to make their way south in order to receive humanitarian aid. Again, that is speculation on my part, and we will likely learn more in the coming days as the military's plans are approved by the Israeli government. However, in trying to understand what possibly this major expansion of fighting is going to mean, that is what I managed to piece together as a result of the different leaks. That is my summary of the recent developments in the Israel-Hamas war. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to send them on to anyone you think might be interested in the developments in the war. Hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.